So today we have the esports mom, Kim Meltzer. How are you doing today?
Can't complain. I'm grateful for the fact that we're post COVID and moving forward into the next, I guess, generation of video gaming and esports experiences. Now that we've survived that, so no complaints from my end, anyway.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just start right out the gate. How'd you get your title of esports mom?
A really bizarre start to someone who had just turned 40. So you can imagine being an older person coming into the experience, and nobody would have seen me coming. I worked in the hotel and hospitality industry my whole life and built group sales for multi luxury properties around the world. And in that, I had just moved into my own company, and I had had this amazing woman named Donna Graves from Encompass as one of my clients. And it was her that I kind of reached out to when I was starting to get back into the swing of things. And lo and behold, before I knew it, she had allowed me to do some location scouting and building out an opportunity for what at that point I did not know until I got into the depth of it was Call of Duty Black Ops 1 launch. And we built the first event that brought in 50 of the top press for Activision at that point. And we created with this team the experiential component to bring Black Ops to life. And it was there that I was supporting the infrastructure for the location scouting, the infrastructure for the hotel, everything that I had done in my career, but opened up into this experience with the developers at Treyarch and the marketing team of Activision. And then, of course, the Encompass team that was so unreal and creative. And it was there that in the ballroom where we had created this multiplayer experience that I was told by some of the press to come and play. And I laughed because they were like 10 times my experience. And I hadn't even like gotten to an Xbox 360 yet. So they're giving me the controller and like, yeah, let's play. And I'm like, I haven't seen life since Atari. What are you talking about? He's like, no, go for it. So it was the funniest thing. I think I was pure entertainment for them at that point. And he said, what's your gamer tag? And I was like, gamer tag. And he said, no, what's your gamer tag when you play? And I was like, oh my God, dude, seriously, I don't even have one. And he goes, you have to have a gamer tag. How can you not have a gamer tag? So I was like, I wouldn't even know where to start. And he goes, we're going to call you the COD mom. And I was like, okay. So it just kind of started from there and built the first set of esports experiences for Call of Duty Black Ops championships. And then obviously for the entire like Black Ops franchise. And when I had gotten out of Call of Duty and started working with other games and other pro players and started building out that travel and hospitality component, which I had built from the ground up, um, they started calling me the esports mom because I was all of esports and still mom. So I was just there when there was nobody around to be present to all of these gamers flying all over the world, and no one knew how to manage and deal with the talent. And I was working with the publishers and developers, and here I am 15 years later, and now I'm the global esports mom. So I guess that's kind of the start of a really interesting branding from someone who had no clue what I was doing back, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think most of us know what we're doing now. So
Yeah, exactly, and here we are,
yeah,
right? Just older, that's all
yeah,
I can say, you know?
a few lessons learned, or at least a few opportunities to learn those lessons.
Absolutely. It's humbling, though, can I just tell you that? People think that esports is so easy and video gaming, and I'm like, I feel so honored that I was trusted so long ago that, my reputation has still, like, stayed true to today, which that is very humbling, and you're grateful for those moments. But as an industry, even with COVID coming in and out of it, we've always had this amazing family. And regardless of the issues that everyone has, this group of people in all of the ecosystem has just been phenomenal. Like I love it. I have a passion, and I don't think I'll ever like leave this industry. It's just who I am.
Yeah, I know when we were putting on events for the music industry. Ironically, I'm actually wearing the last festival I was a part of, the Free Fingerstyle Collective. Uh, we were bringing people in from all over the place, and the logistics to bring in just solo acoustic acts,
Mhm.
uh, I mean, the visas, the hotels, the travel from, Brazil, from Russia, from, all across Europe, and then all across the United States and a few other places. Like, just seeing behind the scenes of that, was eye-opening to how difficult just getting people, places was. So, like, I guess we can start there, like, or actually, back up one step further, what does it even take to have a venue to host an esports event?
Well, and that comes back to my hotel and hospitality career because, what people don't understand is that each stakeholder that you work with, whether it's a venue, a hotel, transportation company, an airlines, each of them have their own rules and regulations. And when you're trying to organize a priority of all of that as separate stakeholders who become one stakeholder, really in this situation, the venue is 1% of the situation. It is where everyone is going to go and enjoy the actual activation of the game. But what comes to play inside of that is a world and an art of not just logistics, but planning and facilitating what each and every person is going to have. So there's a psychology of it, and that's where I think I feel very like lucky to have the gift of being kind of in a sense emotionally intelligent. So I don't have this academic feel, I have more of this relational feel, but I can do both sides, and I'm very lucky to have both an academic and a kind of an intuitive understanding. So you kind of have that creative and that academic side. And when you're planning and doing transactional type of opportunities with a venue, the venue is going to not just say it's going to cost you $100,000 just to walk in the door. Like that is not even the beginning of what it takes to be able to hire someone of that level, whether it's Staples Center or whether it's a wedding venue. Like every one of them has rules and regulations to which you have to guide yourself for that creative idea. So for me, when we get into talking about venues is like step 3 of the process, right? There's so much more that goes with that. And most of the world in which we live just go straight to the venue and they think that that's the whole thing. And that's been the challenge of, where we've come as an industry is that it's imperative to have the venue, but it's also imperative to find all of that backdrop to what it takes to bring someone from Russia or Ukraine or Los Angeles or Norway. Like everything has a rhyme and a reason, and that's where it's been interesting having had the background that I had to know how to deal and organize and adjust and logistically, kind of work in that part of the field. So
Yeah, I mean, coming from, more the production side of things, like whenever we're, putting this event together, like we had, Elixir and then I think Mason Guitars was like kind of the two main sponsors of this event. And so like it was like, okay, so we have our production that we need to do, but we also need to fulfill the request of these sponsors while we're having this. And
right,
then we are working hard to bring up those, but then we've also got to deal with the artists and all their individual sponsors and like what they have to do for
right.
them. Uh, and that's when we're getting things together. Uh,
Right, right. Well, and my biggest lesson in the hotel industry when I was booking groups into the hotel was if you're a Pepsi hotel and Coke wants to come to your hotel, they're not going to give you the time of day because you can't do a Coke product in a Pepsi hotel, right? You can't have Frito-Lay come in if you're working with Coke because they're a Pepsi product. Same with these, organizers that are working with artists. As you know, an artist can give you a writer and it has very specific requirements because they want to see if you can pull it off, and secondly, these are certain things that they want, just to be comforted. So if you're a we'll say a gray goose house, you can't bring in another type of spirit, right, or a different type of vodka. Like you have to know your entire ecosystem, on top of the fact that you're not just taking care of the talent and you're not just taking care of the hotel and you're not taking care of the venue. And now you've got, you know, player acquisitions that are going on with brands. And I mean, you have to see like that whole big picture, because the back side of it is that lawsuits are lawsuits for a reason. Half of them can be, or I would say half of them or three-quarters of them are unnecessary. It's just, again, it's, do you plan it properly and understand who you're working with, your audience, your brands, your stakeholders, your budgets? Like, there's just a lot to it, that nobody talks about.
Yeah, and keeping everybody happy, or at least happy enough, because you have to make compromises somewhere, because
Yep.
not everybody can be the title sponsor, uh, and even if you have multiple title sponsors somehow, uh, now you're balancing between, they want this amount of screen time for their product or service or branding or whatever it is, and then now this other one's like, "Well, we also want this much screen time." It's like, "Well, we also still have to have the event." And
Right.
then it's like,
Right.
now it's you're you're not only dealing with, "Okay, just run this ad in between games." It's,
Right.
"Okay, like, now you've got this sponsored segment that's going on," uh, and that steps down into production. So
100%.
yeah, and so now it's like, okay, for the venue and the broadcast, what do the audio engineers need to know? What does the video producer need to know? Like, what does the talent, the casters, the analysts, what do they need to know?
100%. And that's where communication is key. And I think that's been probably the hardest, I would say, exposure to any industry is, you can think that you're communicating properly, but interpersonal communication, group communication, and then ultimately being able to reach out to the fans, each has a place and a time. And if you don't set your expectations up front, then you don't have a whole lot to work from the foundation of whatever it is that you're accomplishing. So, that too comes into strategy. And then ultimately for the brand wants to have brand awareness, then it needs to have marketing properly, and then it needs to sell. And at the end of the day, we don't know how to sell. And that's, part of the deal. Then you've got the artist who's just making money because he has a product, right? And he wants to sell that product, but that doesn't, that overlays to something else that connects to whatever that sponsor's trying to do. It's just so much more. And then the poor production team, who's really the bones to all of the event, are stuck trying to juggle everybody's expectations, and then they're kind of like let down, and you've got a lot of labor who has to be added in now because you didn't have the right setup to really understand the run of show properly, or the expectations of the game. Man, we could talk hours for just, what game are we talking about, and how does it run, and how long does each game last, and within that, are you talking about, 2 3 days of gaming? Like, there's just so many pieces to this. And I'm preaching to the choir, to
Mhm.
you and anyone else who knows this, but it's just way more. So they, cutting corners and compromising and thinking your budget's going to be $2, there's a big reality check. But there's also people abusing the system too. So you've got to, again, know what you're doing in order to build out something that's going to be foolproof at the end of the day.
Yeah. So we have a Kyle in the chat, and they were asking, the logistics that are being discussed seem so intense. Would love to know how Kim manages that much data.
Building the amazing team that I built. So when I had my own company and I was building out, so like I went to Twitch. Twitch took me on and they said, "Hey, we have 9 events. We're going to give you 3, and we'll see how it goes." And at that point, it was like, just jump in. So my first one was DreamHack Austin. First time it was being built out. Twitch wanted me to build out a community lounge with all of the pro players. So it wasn't just a specific set of pro players, it was all the pro players. I did not even have any of the travel stuff. I had 9 days to create a team and build out the logistics to get all of the players in, get them settled, know where they needed to be, build a community lounge that was going to allow them where they could eat. I had massage therapists. We had all of the communication hub in there, and had to do it in 9 days. So, how I have figured this out is that I lay out a full plan of all of the requirements on a day-to-day agenda, and then I go backwards. So for instance, if my team has to come in 3 days early, right? we have to know exactly what those 3 days are going to entail before the event starts. And then each day, those events have certain specific requirements. And in that, I can tell you right now what things are missing, what things are solidified, what areas of questions I have. And before you know it, I have a full daily agenda. By the end of the event, I know exactly where I'm at each day and each hour of the day. And that's what I learned in the hotel industry, is that you have to have a run of show and you have to know exactly what's going on day to day. But that includes everything from, like, when does the pro player need to be there, and when do I feed them, and do I need to transfer them, and what expectations of backpacks do they need to bring in them, what are they traveling with. Like, I know, it's a gift. It's something that I have learned over time, and I could teach it, but I can't tell you that it's a foolproof way every day. There's just kind of a foundation. So if I can answer that, it's mainly know the event, know the agendas, know exactly what your expectations are, and then go backwards.
Yeah, I think also one of the hardest things, like when it comes to running events, with like the larger the scale it is, the more people you have involved, the communication between that team is so important. Because
Yeah,
let's say a computer stops working for some reason during an event, you've got to have a protocol in place for, hey, if we have a technical difficulty because of this,
right.
testers you need to cover and be able to cover for this amount of time. And then
100.
if that continues to go on for a certain period of time, then we'll cut to a break. And if we're cutting to a break, we need to have something to fill that space. So production team needs to have all of these things in the back ready to go for these inevitable things that may happen.
100%. Well, and go one step too is, when we didn't work on the production part, right? We weren't doing the broadcasting and we weren't running the operations of the production, but I was supporting the entire ecosystem, right? So whether it was a brand needing to do an experiential activation, or it was a pro player, or it was the event needing support, or the hotel, or whatever, right? You have to have all of these people on a call. Like, one thing we don't do well is communicate as a group. So one of the great things that was my success is, if we were working with NGE or ESL, whoever, we were always on calls together. We worked simultaneously, so that if there was an issue or a question, I was asking a lot of that up front, right?
Mhm.
Like, for instance, as stupid this is, I mean, this is going to sound petty, but how important it was production was handling so much of the value of the production, that the pro players needed, earbuds in order to put it under their headsets. Well, do you think the production team was thinking about that? That was the last of their worries. So I had to know where I kind of fit my expectations in, and said, as pro player responsibility, I will do all of these things. Do you guys okay with that? Yes. Okay, I'll put it on my budget, and I'll make sure that I have, 30 earbuds, so that if one goes out, I'm going to have that one available, right? If the computers are down, who's doing that? Who's taking care of that responsibility? If the broadcast goes down, what are our backup plans? Right? Do we have anything that's going to support that responsibility? But you have to know and have some expertise in doing it 10,000 times to know exactly that it becomes not necessarily a wheel that continuously goes. You've got to know that each experience has a foundation, and then you have to build around it. So my concept is, know the box and learn how to think outside of it. That's always been the case.
Yeah, I think, like when it comes to live events, like especially like outdoor ones, one of the biggest things we deal with is weather. And
$100.
it's like cool, like we've put up, this $500,000 worth of equipment, and then all of a sudden, it's wherever we're at, it's like, oh, it might rain, or oh, we might get a windstorm. It's like, okay, well, what do we got to do to protect the equipment? And is it something that we can still have the show through? And
100.
if we're going to still have the show through, how does that change what the artists need to do on stage to deal with, you know, the wind blowing, or, whatever pyrotechnics or lighting, or like there's a lot there that you've got to build those contingency plans in. And a lot of it also, just as you do it more and more, you gain that experience to where you may not necessarily plan for it, but it's happened to you once before. And so you remember, at the very least, I don't want to try and do it the way I did before again.
Right? You learn when you have to cancel something, because the risk is greater than the actual experience, and that also entails, like, they just I forget the name of the festival in Vegas just recently, and they shut it down because the winds were so bad that they had done it previously, and the actual concert stage came apart and caused a lot of serious damage. So you've got security and you've got safety, and that's always part of the equation. And that too, like, being able to train on that, you know, most people give you a lot of generic conversation or vague conversation. When you're learning how to plan and to execute live events, life in general, right? Once you learn logistics, you can do anything. And I think that was the greatest piece of my career that I'm grateful for. But you do this in everyday life too. I mean, you wake up in the morning and you kind of have a set of expectations you've got to fulfill. You've got to know that you're thinking about everything from how do I get from point A to point B to, like, did I eat? Is my car okay? Am I going to need gas? Like, you don't realize how much logistics you do in your own world, or how much you try to avoid because you don't want to deal with it.
Mhm.
But it's all of those factors. There is a very specific list of things that you can teach yourself that give you the basic underlay. And then as you get more expert experiences in that, you learn real quick what are your foundation. And it's just years of experience. I mean, look, I've been doing this 30 years. Like, I've done over 500 events in my career, and they're not just esports. I mean, I've dealt with pharmaceutical and corporate, and I've done big associations, and traveled the world. And it's very much the same but very different. So it's just time in and also learning, just like, from someone like me. Teaching it is easy because I've done it millions of times. When you're first in it, when I was a rookie, scariest thing in the world, because you don't know what you don't know, for sure.
Mhm.
Even as a consumer.
Yeah, I think that's where when it comes to breaking down, like, all the different aspects, it's one thing to be just like, "Oh, okay," like, all you need is somebody, on some cameras and then somebody telling them to where they need to point the cameras. It's like, that's part of it, and then you get into what it actually takes for the lighting and the type of equipment you need for the type of shots you're looking for,
Right.
uh, and you have to make sure that the cameras aren't in each other's shots or in each other's ways as much as possible, and so, even as something as simple as, "Hey, let's make sure we have cameras on the right spots during important moments," like, we talk about replay operators. This is more so in, like, CS:GO and Valorant,
Mm.
but, they have to have this sixth sense on where, do they need to be focused in on this play, so they've gotta know the game and bring that forward.
100%. And again, that's, what game are you playing? What are the expectations from the publisher or the developer? I mean, it's crazy that we take for granted so much of what we see in content now. And, that's kind of sad too, is that content has gotten to the point where we're so overstimulated. I don't even think we remember what it was that we were watching in the first place. Right. You've got to really, like, hone into what are you wanting to get out of this experience. And as a production team, as a producer, you have to think like a fan. You can't think like you think, right? It's ultimately who's watching it and what are they trying to get out of the situation, right? Because you want them back. You don't want them to be like, well, that was fun. Peace out. Great. It's so many pieces, so many pieces.
Yeah, because you have on top of that, like, you have the production, which is, like, the dressing and, like, the flavor of it, but you still need, like, the good, you know, meal to put that on, where it's just like, "Oh, that was a really cool seasoning that they had there, but what was it on?" You know?
Totally.
So having that meat of the story and the storytelling of the event, uh, in and of itself, just being there, is probably, I think, it's the biggest art form of any type of live event, is, like, what's the story of that live event?
100%. And, and it's funny too, if you talk to anybody who watches it, why do we have live events? Because when you think about it, playing the game behind a screen is great and everybody does it and they enjoy it. But how amazing is it to be live at an event, be interactive with your friends, be able to have an experience that you can take home with you. And while you're watching it on screen is great, but you've got the best of both worlds. So that person who's behind the screen is expecting that screen to come alive and to give them something even more dramatic, that makes them go, man, I was there, I remember having that experience. So And that, I think, if everybody can remember one thing from today, it's the fan is the most important piece of anything we do, and everything else is secondary. And it's always been the other way around. And that's, I think, where the challenge lies, is that the build out is the expectation of the fan, because without the fan, there is nothing else, right?
Yeah, because if you don't have people showing up to your event, how good is the event, you know?
Might as well do it online and be digital, and all it is just numbers to you instead of real people who actually mean something.
Yeah, and then on top of that, it's for, like, the online side of it, you still have to have people that care enough to tune in. And
Yep.
so, what is it that, once you have, more or less like these logistics figured out, or at least, or enough, or far along enough on the way of being figured out, that you have the event scheduled and you're starting to promote, what is it that places have to do then to then get the event out there and to let people know about it and to get them invested in the event so that way they show up at the event or at the very least catch it online?
Everything is about the five senses. So if I can motivate anything, it's what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? And what do you touch? So they have to hit all five of those. And, within that, we're lucky in our industry, because if somebody loves Valorant and they find a live event, it doesn't take much, right? Now they're just interested in, how do I get there? What am I going to do when I get there? Who am I going to see, right? What food am I going to eat? What am I going to do while I'm in this incredible space? Right? There's all of those pieces. So they have to be addressed properly. So you can say, hey, I'm going to do a Call of Duty event in Los Angeles. Okay, that stirs the excitement. But what do you do from there? You've got to be able to really understand, how do you expose those five senses? If Coke's going to be there and Coke's is doing some cool activation, and maybe you're getting wrapped cans and you get to get XP points, or there's something special, you've got to share that. If there's a hotel and a special rate that allows them to know that they don't have to be taken advantage of, and there's organized, opportunity for them, that needs to be shared. If there's something that gives you an indication that maybe there's a gamer who owns a bar in the area and they can't wait to go see it because they're old enough to drink, but they get something really cool out of it, or they get to hang with their friends, you've got to be able to share that, right? Everything about the experience has to be brought to the table, because why on a vacation do you want to go to Mexico, right? Well, what's in Mexico at that resort that makes me excited about being there? If they're just like, hey, go to resort and what in Puerto Vallarta, right? Like, okay, big deal. I could go to Spain. I could go. Why there? What is it going to do for me that's going to make me excited? And what's memorable about it that's going to give me something that nobody else can give me? Right? That's thus what's behind me, is it's all of my experiences that my whole entire office is, created with, because it reminds me of what I do every day. Right? It reminds me, like, hey, this is cool. I forgot, like, even this, whoops, where is it? It's right here. My World of Warcraft, I built out the support for BlizzCon back in 2015, and this was one of the things that they were giving out. Not giving out, it was like $100, I think, was to
Mhm.
buy it. And I just remember everybody coming at me because they knew I was a collector, and like, Kim, you got to go get it. You got to go get it. It's like the coolest thing. And I didn't really have a lot of time. And finally, they like drug me up there and like, put your $100 down and get it because it's going to be cool. It's one of my favorite pieces now because it reminds me of BlizzCon 2015. There were millions of other things going on, but there's a story behind it, you know,
Mhm.
and it's just the goofiest thing, because it's there.
Yeah. So, what do you think esports needs to do a better job of, like when it comes to like that storytelling? Like, is it people like aren't forward facing enough like at the events? Like, is it too
It,
much about the org and the competition that unless you're like the hyper competitive person, like, and you're like interested in all the nuances of, site executes or rotational strategies and all that, like, what is it that the players, the casters, that whole side of things can do better at that you've seen, across your years?
I would say we've had an amazing success with the games that I've had the ability to do live events on. I think part of it is giving them the floor to be able to interact with the fans more, to be able to bring it alive. I mean, the excitement. of watching the competition and seeing things happen live in front of your face and watching them on that stage. So you're like there instead of behind the screen, right? I mean, that is the whole purpose of why esports was created, is it's an event to celebrate that instead of being behind a screen. And everything around that has to also be expressed, because again, you could watch that same thing online, but what makes it more exciting is it's fan engagement. It's the capability to have 10,000 fans sitting there getting excited at that one moment that'll be historical for the rest of our careers, right? To be able to go back to that, right? When I remember when we did Call of Duty Championship, and I remember Optic losing to Denial for, it was 2013 or 2015. I can't remember. It was so long ago. And I remember, when Optic lost, and I remember all the broadcasters being like, well, why are we even doing this anymore? All the, nobody's going to watch it because Optic lost. And I just remember sitting there laughing and thinking, but where's the engagement? Like now there's something even more exciting. Not that I was happy that Optic lost, but there was still a group of unknowns coming up and trying to fight for that, and Denial won the whole entire tournament. So here they are with $100,000 each, and I think at that point Attach was 17 and hadn't even graduated high school yet. I think he was in process of graduating that year, and it changed his entire life, right? All of them, Clayster, all of them. And Optic, they got to come back, right? And yeah, it was defeating for them. And I remember the experiences of watching the guys coming out after they lost, and they were just distraught, right? And trying to console them while I'm like looking at where this like championship is going and trying to keep that momentum. And it wasn't for the casters and the fans and the excitement, we wouldn't have had that moment of glory at the end of it, because you still have to engage the rest of the experience, right? It doesn't just end because a competition is, in place, or we win and it's over, right? There's just so much more to that than just competitive side.
Yeah, the storylines is where I think, like, like, esports in general just needs, like, that next level up, and I think that comes down to more stability within esports
Right.
and everybody involved investing into creating that storyline, uh, and so that's kinda, within Rocket League, right now, that's kinda the big discussion right now, with K Corp, got beat out in the open qualifier, and so they're not in the main event, and, they won the first 3,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah,
now
it
it's
was
like,
shocking.
yeah, like, where do we start to find this balance, for season formats, so that way we get the fans invested during that season, so that way when the LANs come, you have the K Corp Ultras showing up because
Right. You're
K Corp
supporting
is
somebody
there.
else. Right, or they're there too. Well, think of it from a sports perspective. Like, it's funny because I always say sports is not esports and esports is not sports. I'll say that forever. However, how does sports work? And why is it that we keep thinking that we're sports when we're esports? Because you have a community of followers. Let's say, for instance, you have the Minnesota Vikings, or you've got the LA Lakers, or you've got any team in any form of sports, and you have a community of fans that are forever loyal, right?
Mhm.
K-Corp has a community of fans that are loyal. If the Lakers lose in the NBA championships, right, they don't go, or LA Kings, we're LA Kings fans. My husband is still he is damned and determined to be an LA Kings fan, whether they win or lose. But if they didn't win, we go to wherever else like we want to focus our attention on. So, if it's, another team, and he's just going to be determined to see them win, he's not giving up the LA Kings. He's going to be a fan of whatever it is that he wants that team, whatever it is, to win. It's the same that we have never really saw in esports. We're starting to see more of it because we have a community that's been built around these games, and we've got to be loyal to the teams that we love, but we've also got to have that sports minded ability to know, like, K Corp lost, it just happens that way. We can't guarantee that. That's what makes these games so fun, is that you can't guarantee anybody to be the winner every time. Some days you're cut champions, some days you're going to be at the bottom of the barrel, and that's the beauty of the competition. You've got to be able to get K Corp to be able to say, hey man, we lost, but grow up enough to know that, like, yeah, you lost this one, but that doesn't mean you have to like blow out the rest of Rocket League for it, because one day you'll be back to champion again. And how you handle yourself in this is how you're going to end up building more loyalty, right? And
Mhm.
that's the part that's the psychology of it that I love. Like, that's what I love with being part of the pro players and the talent is, man, we just have so much fun with it, and we get the fans engaged, and you get everybody excited, and the parents, and it was a community that nobody could ever replace. And it's gotten bigger and stronger, but you can't forget the foundation of what we built in Rocket League back in, day one. That's what made us who we were and who we are. And we're always going to be special to the gaming industry for that reason. COD's the same way, man. You may love Optic, but there's a lot of other, crazy teams out there that you can
Mhm.
support, each and every, competition.
Yeah, so I think, when it comes to, like, supporting, uh, not just being there and being a fan of them, but, to hit on, like, the business side of it, how can these orgs use these events to provide value to the fans that's economical for them? Because I think that's the big question in esports right now for sustainability's sake is what are the orgs providing the fans that's giving them the monetary value that's worth the dollars that the esports orgs need to run effectively.
I mean, go back to just celebrity relations, right? If you have a celebrity you absolutely love and you can go to Comic Con and meet them and get an autograph and a picture, that's one of many things, right? Being able to have merch. I mean, you see these kids who, at spring training for Major League Baseball, they go out to Phoenix because they can actually meet their heroes. They can be even more, interpersonal with them. It makes it cool. Like, that's what makes you feel like you're part of that story instead of just being somebody out in the media of eyes watching, that you're not just a number, you're actually someone that counts. And that's one of the things that the orgs get, forget is you're only as good as the fans that support you, and not every fan is going to be able to have that. But if you're coming to a live event, do meet and greets, be able to have interaction. If there's a sponsor who's supporting them, make sure that sponsor does something really cool that's really valuable and memorable that you may not have any other time, that gets these guys excited to go. I mean, it's all about interaction, and it's not just about content. I mean, it's great when I can say, hey, man, I could call, some of my old pro players, that follow me and have my phone number. I could call them and say, hey, can you, do this for me or take a picture or whatever. I mean, they would probably kindly do it, but it's not like I have to have content to prove myself, right? I mean, when you have a relationship, it really means something. So it's just part of being the story instead of just being the outsider who's watching.
Yeah, so do you think there needs to be more of an active role with developing the players to have that type of interaction and start to, entail that into, like, their actual contracts other than, "Hey, just be good at the game?"
You have to have balance, right?
Mhm,
And I will say this because having been in the industry, I'm very what's the word? A bulldog, I guess.
mhm,
I've had to watch over players and keep them out of the fan engagement because they have anxiety, or you've got a kid who literally wins a championship in his bedroom, in South Carolina, and the next thing you know, he's in front of 10,000 people and he's playing a professional game and he's never done this in his life. You've got to walk them through the processes of what that's like. If they've never experienced that, that's a whole different conversation than somebody who's done it for 10 years and could do it with their eyes closed, right? So it's very developed per player and per experience, and you have to really know what their strengths and weaknesses are, and you also have to help them find areas where they enjoy kind of not just playing but being human too. And I think we have to have that balance, right? So it's not a black and white type of situation where you're going to tell every player you have to do so much content, you have to have so many fans, and you have to build into that. That's a
mhm,
personality situation, right? So some of them will be really strong and some may not, but you can always work that into helping them achieve goals as they grow. And then ultimately, like the attaches and the claysters and all these, like, I could name 100 of them right now from COD, but they've done this a long time. They love getting into the fan area, and they love, doing stuff because it's part of who they are. They know the value of that. So it's education, and it's communication, and it's learning the system of which it's going to work. And safety is a big deal right now. You know that
Mhm,
too. Like, we don't think about that. I've had kids who just walk in the middle of 10,000 people and forget to realize they're a pro player. And I have
mhm.
to pull them out from there and be like, dude, you can't do that. And they're like, well, I'm just, it's not a big deal. And I'm like, until they all crowd you and scare the crap out of you and you got nowhere to go. And I'm going to have to try to like pull you out of that. You got to know your boundaries to know what's safe and what isn't too. Like, there's so many pieces to this again that you've got to be careful about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough individual thing that, I think when it comes to, like, the org side of things, like, what do you think where I guess this is the question, like, where does that responsibility lie? Like, is it with the orgs? Is it with, the player managers of the event? Like, well, where obviously, there's somebody who needs to help equip these players to be able
Right.
to handle these situations,
Right.
but where does that responsibility lie, you know?
And that's a loaded question, but I'll answer it as best as I can. If I created an organization right now and I wanted to put money into it and I wanted to build it out, first of all, it's dependent upon the publisher and the developer and what game we're going to play, right? And the teams, that build out from there, right? If they're going to be Valorant, you've got to specifically build a team that's for Valorant and those requirements. If it's Call of Duty, if it's Rocket League, whatever. When you build an organization, you have to build it again from fan to player to broadcast. Like, you have to think about all of those stakeholders, and you have to be able to know, like, what is my goal, right? My goal is not only to build a ridiculously amazing business and organization, but it's also, again, to reach out to the fan and get their expectations, right? Not all of them can be met, but a good portion of them can. So when you build it out, you got to think from top to bottom, right? You've got to know who's your target market, who's your stakeholders, who's going to be there for you through thick and thin. If you lose a championship, do you have enough loyalty that they're going to keep coming back, right? And on the same
Mhm,
token, are you going to burn out your player, right? You're going to burn out your executive, the player talent that, or the player and talent management. They've never really, I won't say that they haven't. I would say that I have created a specific ecosystem that was built the way I know how to build it. And I've never really been replicated because I give my heart, soul, and mind into that piece of it. So that's why I became mom. And in the same token, if you're going to do stuff like that, most of these guys that do it are young, and they just kind of like make sure you're where you're supposed to be for production, and then the rest of it doesn't mean anything. And so there's, or are they getting fed at 11 o'clock, right? It's so much more than that. And we usually always work, when we did Rocket League, we always worked with the orgs, the players, and obviously psionics and whoever else was part of that. And we would ask the right questions of like, what can and can we not do, right? What can we give to the fan, but how far can we go, right? What are we going to do to make sure the players are safe and secure and have an area where they can have a decompression area, right? Where they can feel themselves, right? I always built out really specific pieces to each and every opportunity that we went to, no matter where it was in the world. And it gave a sense of foundation. And once you know that foundation, these players and these fans and everyone in between knows their expectations, right? They know what they need to do, and they know where their safety is. And you've got to always be able to give everybody that balance. And that's most important. So from an org perspective, the org is only, they're an invited part of the experience, right? So
mhm.
so their goal is to get in and play, but they also have a responsibility to everybody that's coming to like be a part of that. And it's a very fine line. So I can't give you like a direct, here's a right and wrong answer. It really depends on the scope and the requirements of what it is that's being asked of each and every person that's going there. And it seems like it's impossible to answer, but I can tell you, I know the formula. It's just, you can't really be vague for all things that are esports, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you have to contextualize it, like everything else, in the world, there's general principles that you can follow, but who does who needs to handle it for this event, for this esport, or this event and then who needs to handle it for each esport within that event if you have something like a dream hack where you have multiple things
100%.
going on, because you have different communities that have different norms, that have different, expectations,
Right.
different behavioral patterns of we just want to be very generic about it.
Um,
Like the Super Smash Brothers scene, like they're gonna be really loud, and it really
yep.
doesn't matter who's playing, because they're all fans of everybody that's there for the most part. You have a few people that have kind of adopted the heel role, and the crowd will
Right.
boo them, and they'll feed off of that, and there's that storyline that they've built themselves. But then you step into a space like Valorant, and it's okay, like there are these prodigies coming up, and you have way more production value when it
Right.
comes to it compared to Melee. And so, like the Valorant fan and what they're expecting, and what a Melee fan and what they're expecting,
Totally different.
totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different personalities, totally different, uh, subcultures of esports. And so,
Right. And that's a perfect, kind of conversation about the difference why sports and esports doesn't work is that if you're all about baseball, you know what baseball's expectations are. If you know hockey or football or whatever, like what they're trying to accomplish, right? Esports is like every day is a different day and every game is a different game and every fan is a different fan. And we're fortunate that you can love multiple games, and if
mhm.
you're that, crazy to do that, more power to you. But there's a lot of expectation, right? But none of them make sense because they're not the same. And try to teach that to a bunch of non-endemics who are like, well, we can make sports out of esports. And I'm like, no, you can't. Like, you never will. That is not how we built this industry. And that's why it's failed miserably, because you can't tell Riot that they have to be Blizzard, or Blizzard has to be Valve. Like, that's not going to happen. This is not going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at it from like traditional sports perspective, it's like saying, "Hey, we need to implement hockey's the code into tennis." It's like
Yeah, that's
it
not going
makes
to
no
happen.
sense. Like,
It's not going to happen.
when is the last time someone has come to blows on a tennis court? Like at most, like you see them smash their racket, or yell at
Right.
the line judge, and
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
that gets clipped. But in hockey, it's like if somebody fights, it's like, oh,
Best part.
that's just part of it, like that's part of that culture. But then, you know, it's very interesting. There was like a college football brawl that happened like uh sometime last year. Everybody was like, oh, like this was disgraceful. And then like literally that same week, the Canucks and Flames were playing each other, and before the game even started, tensions were high. They
Yeah.
dropped the puck, and but as soon as that puck hit the ice for the first time, everybody dropped their gloves and was squaring up, and we're all, "This is amazing. This is what hockey's
Right?
about." And it's like, what's the like, you've got these 2 different cultures, and you can't just be like, "Oh, yeah, let's bring baseball culture to Rocket League."
Yeah, that's not gonna
It's
happen.
just
Yeah,
like,
even soccer, it doesn't make any sense. I mean,
yeah.
even soccer doesn't make sense in Rocket League. It just doesn't. There's certain compatible pieces that you could probably, like, enjoy doing, but it's never gonna be the same. They're very different, the same kinda concept, but, shooting a ball into a net through a car is so different than watching a professional soccer game. Like, it's just different. But you can love soccer and you can love Rocket League. You just have to know expectations. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that's where, as we're moving forward into esports and like all these things, I think that's where I guess like the key is for like the sustainability, comes from is, what cultures have developed, and then how do you come alongside those cultures, not come in and say, hey, you guys are now going to act like hockey fans and should be hockey fans, and we're going to do everything like hockey. Why are you guys leaving? Why do you guys not wanna come and hang out? Like, we brought you this great thing, It worked for hockey, it should work for, you know, uh
It it's never
Mm.
ending. I swear it's never
Yeah.
ending. And it's funny. And, it. it's hard sometimes to explain what you see, right?
Mhm.
So it takes a lot of capability to be able to express what it is that's happening. Again, you've got the academic and you've got the creative. So you've got to be able to speak to the right audience, speaking the right language. And even that has its challenges because, name two completely different video games and language is completely different. I mean, you wouldn't even know if you don't know Valorant and you start shooting off all of the interesting things about Valorant and I've never even heard of Valorant, it's like over your head. No
Mhm.
clue whatsoever.
Yeah, it's like Viper as well is super overpowered. If you don't know anything about Valorant, you're like, "What's a Viper's wall?"
100%.
You know? Like,
Yeah.
well, when
Yeah.
you're talking about Jet, like, wait, like, are you talking about, like, that thing from Fallout? Or, like, are you talking about a plane? Like, it's like, no, we're talking about the one who, like, floats and, like, throws knives." You're like, "Wait, what?" Like,
Yeah.
you gotta I think from the, like, the developer standpoint, like, that's what I think's been really I think, Nintendo's probably, like, the worst example of it.
Yeah.
Like, Melee, uh, built up this amazing culture and, they've built their esports from the ground up, uh, but they've they didn't embrace that, and I think sometimes I don't know, it's weird with Nintendo, I kinda get their protection of IP philosophy, but when it brings to that a developer, relationship with their fans. I think probably the most recent example of the devs and the fans working together, uh, would be like the Helldivers situation, that just happened, 2, 3
Right.
weeks ago.
Yep.
You have the publisher wanting certain things, you have the developer wanting certain things, you have the fans expecting certain things. And as soon as those expectations weren't met, you had a full scale revolt.
Yep.
Uh,
And gamers
and
don't have an issue with that. Let me tell you, that is the
yeah,
most amazing thing I've ever seen. No patience for that, you know?
yeah, yeah. I think when it comes to breaking down that, like having that type of relationship where like the devs were just like, yeah, you guys should go review it where it counts. And like they did. Like that's the developers have done such a good job developing a relationship with their fan base, with their supporters, that when the fans needed to do something, help the devs out, it was done.
Right.
And then the devs came back and, are coming up with this amazing cape from that event.
100%. Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
so you have like two sides of the same coin. And I think that's where maybe the AAA devs have just gotten so far into the production side of it that they've lost
The
the
hindsight.
the roots of it. And so
Yeah.
I think we're starting to have that full circle, come back now.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, even with Microsoft taking over Activision, like they have some big shoes to fill. Like Activision's not something that's just going to disintegrate, right? I mean, the fans could easily walk away and I hope and pray they don't. But on the same token, Microsoft has been a platform. It hasn't been fan based.
Mhm,
So I happily watch and hope that, when we talk about even the console side of it, like don't forget who your money comes from and who the gamers are as a whole, right? They're not just a transaction. This is a lifestyle. This is a piece of who they are. This is their soul. You're not just talking to somebody who just goes to a GameStop or a Walmart and buys their game and that's it. Like, peace out, you're a casual gamer. We don't have to deal with you. Like, that's the contrary. They are the most important asset to the entire piece of this. And without that, there is no gaming. We will literally lose a video gaming industry as soon as they forget the fan is the most important aspect of it. End of story. Now, unfortunately, fans can give their input and not all of it will be there. But, if you've got a valid point, it should be said. And they should have focus groups from the beginning. Why are we not having focus groups that allow fans in from the beginning of concept that they have to be under, strict capability to know that either they're getting paid and they're part of it or whatever. But why are they not in it from the beginning? Because that's your bread and butter.
Mhm.
right? That's one of the things that's most important to me is I always have focus groups because I know that that's most important when we build stuff out. I need that feedback. I want them to find every hole and every fire and everything that could go wrong because in that I have the greatest asset standing in front of me to be able to say I won't do that. That won't happen. I'll make sure to oversee that, right? But
Mhm.
that takes an ego, a non-ego person to be able to say this isn't about me. This is about doing it right and doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, what was, I'm trying to think, uh, Thor from who worked at Blizzard for a while, he was talking about, like, that fan interaction and development, and he was talking about, I'm trying to remember who made, like, the Five Nights at Freddy's series.
Oh
Like,
god,
he
yeah.
made, like, 18 different games, and, like, there was I forget exactly what the name of the game was, but he was just like, "Oh, this guy's gone and put out all these games that kinda suck," but he's, like, constantly getting feedback, and somebody was just like, "All your characters look like creepy animatronics." He's like, "Alright, you know what? Like, you're
I can
right.
take that.
They look like creepy animatronics, so let me make a game about something that, everybody is perceiving my art style to be." And then Five Nights at Freddy's was born,
Yeah, and it's
and that was
hilarious.
his success.
Yep, 100%. That's so true, so true. I love that. But yeah, and again, everything that we do, again, well, I would say the hardest part is on social media. It's gotten to the point that misery loves company. And I
Mhm,
think we've got to stop looking at all the negativity and start looking at the positivity of things because perspective is that if you keep beating down and beating down and beating down, people can't find the good in anything. And I think until they start looking at what can work well. I mean, seriously, constructive criticism is not the problem. It's being an ass and saying, well, you suck. Well, okay, that's great. But what does that mean? And why are you saying that? Because you just feel like you're having a miserable day and that makes you feel better? Like, great. You have every reason to do that. But what is that going to accomplish? That you're miserable, so everybody else needs to be miserable? Like, if we can get the gamers to see the positive again and start building back the communities and start looking at the good in it, they can also be the ones that can be the agitators when it comes to competitive and give crap to everyone that deserves it, right? Like we're not stopping the emotion, we're just putting it in the right places, right? So that it makes sense. It makes social media fun again because I hate being on all the platforms because all I see is just negativity and I'm like, I don't need this, like I love to look at it once in a while just to see what's going on, but it doesn't excite me to see people being beat down. I'm like, what good is that? Does nothing.
yeah, like, I feel like, there's, like, some, like, healthy, like, competitive competition, trash talk
Oh yeah.
between competitors
Oh,
and fans and stuff
absolutely,
like that, but,
absolutely.
to be like, "Oh, like, everything about this is bad," like,
Yeah,
it's like, that's where I feel like we've lost that in the COVID era because, like, it used to be, like, if I walked up to somebody who was just like, "Dude, like, you guys are rotating like you're from 2019." Everybody was just like, "Ooh, like, he's so mean and cocky and
right,
ego and all this other stuff." Uh, and so now he's going back. It's like, I if me and this person were talking, we're just, like, joking around about it, and it's like, we know it's kinda true, we just from stylistically and all that. But when it breaks down, uh, to, like, just online and everybody always assuming it's negative versus, like, playful ribbing,
right.
uh, like, people lose that context and they go, "Oh, we gotta cancel this person because 'cause they're so mean." And it's like, "No, like, we're not being immature. It's like, we're just competitive people, and we're, like, expressing that in its healthy way, and we're friends," you
Right,
know?
right.
Uh,
But that's the
so
difference.
yeah.
You're attacking the behavior, you're not attacking the person. I think that should be educated as well. It's like, you and I are different people,
Mhm.
but we maintain a relationship because you're an awesome person and you think of me in the same way. Do we fail? Absolutely. But the cool thing is that you see the good in me and I see the good in you. And if we do something stupid, you can attest to that stupid behavior and say, hey Kim, maybe you should have thought differently about this and let me tell you why I feel this way. That's constructive criticism. I don't look at you and find a weakness in you as a person and then beat you down and then make it seem like that makes me a better person. That's not acceptable. If you and I are playing a game and you literally like blew something and I can give you crap about it, that makes it fun,
Yeah.
right? Or I do the same thing, right? It's a play experience. It's not we're friends, right? That's how I knew in COVID that we didn't have a full community, that we just had a bunch of people sitting at home who needed something to do and didn't know how it was to be a gamer, right? You saw the difference real quick on somebody who's like, "Oh, you're just a dumbass gamer." And I was like, "Well, that didn't come from our community because we're all gamers and nobody would think like that," right?
Hmm.
That's the big difference you can see. And then as soon as COVID was over, a lot of those people went back to work or did whatever they were doing, and we got back our industry again. And I think that's where the difference lies, is that as gamers, we need to protect each other, right? You know, you can be mad at somebody's behavior. I don't care who you are and what you look like and how tall you are or what your background is. If you're being an idiot, you're being an idiot. It has absolutely zero to do with you,
Hmm.
your, who you are as a person. This is a behavior being addressed, not anything else, right? There's so many things that we can all come at each other with, and I mean, I've been constructively criticized, and I'm grateful for it because it teaches me things that I need to learn. But I've never had anybody come at me and say, "Well, you're a dumb, 55-year-old woman in esports." I mean, like, what good is that going to do? It's not going to do any good, right? You know, I think that's the difference. That's why I
Yeah.
love the gaming community. I love the true gamers in this community because they're the most amazing people I've ever met around the world.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the gaming scene and like you start to like hang out around these people, it reminds you back, at least when I was a kid, like of having LAN parties at like your friend's house for, your birthday, you know?
Right.
It's just
Right.
like, "Hey, you've got an Xbox, you've got an Xbox. Hey, everybody that's, you've got Xbox. All right, so we need to like rent these 10 controllers from Blockbuster so that way everybody has enough, and we're gonna set up all these TVs in a room, and 16 of us are gonna play Halo 2 for 8 hours and drink
Right.
Mountain Dew and eat pizza the whole night, and that's gonna be what we do for fun.
100%. You're
And
welcome to
so,
my twins. You literally, this, I grew up two boys who got to hang out with me in the video game industry and they were young. And that was the best. I had to end up doing a truck at that
mhm,
point. Remember those video game trucks? I think those things loved me because they were always at my house because I didn't have enough room in my house to be able to put 10, you know, 10 LAN or, the internet for the 10 LAN experience. Right. But it was just funny. That was the best. Those are the best years. Like, I miss those days. I
yeah,
miss them.
and I feel like we just when it comes to it, like, I feel like we need more of those that create that environment, so that way when we have, like, the big lands, when we're
Right.
renting out these big spaces, it's like, you still have that small experience, but
Yep.
just with 10, 15, eventually 100,000 other people, you know?
Totally. That's why I love lands. I love watching everybody come together and everybody's just on a high. I mean, it's just the most amazing experience. But the kids that have a network of people that they're close to are always the strongest. It's the kids who are stuck in the small towns in the middle of nowhere who haven't been able to connect except for the screen
Mhm.
and build really cool relationships with people all around the world and don't get to see them, but they know they're close. That's why these lands are so important, to be able to get everybody together and build that family.
Yeah. So, do you think that is where we need to head, like, as an industry? Like, maybe less massive events and more bigger or more smaller local events?
You need
Do you think
both.
we could?
Yeah, we need both. You've got to build a community from the ground floor. I mean, that's where young kids, you're getting from like elementary to middle school, and then you've got, your high school, and of course the high school esports is starting to finally start to pick up, and then you'll get into your college esports and ultimately into possibly pro or career. That's always been the path we've tried to create, and I think we're starting to finally get there. But I even talked to when, movie theaters were interested in esports and talking about building a community. I said, you're only going to be as good as a community in your area, right? If you don't have the community, you've got nothing. So those small communities and building that family there is just as exciting as building a global community at a LAN. It all fits together. That's the
Mhm.
excitement of it. You've got to have it all because the lands are what has kind of got us from the beginning, but the lands are like the finale. You got to have stuff that kind of creates from the beginning to that finale and being able to have those memories, whether you go to a land or not. Those communities are everything, no matter where they're at. Even if it's 10 kids in one small town, that's all it takes.
Mhm.
That's all it takes.
Yeah. So I think we figured out what we need to do. We just need to, go back to the roots and build things from the ground up. Remember what it was that made, these esports fun, uh,
Totally.
and bring those communities back. Like I was trying to explain to somebody, what esports is like and like how does it even work? Like why would people want to watch that? And I was just like, well, 150 years ago, people liked playing baseball, and then they noticed a couple people were really good at baseball. And they're like, "Hey, let's watch these people do baseball." You know,
Yep.
Fast forward, a couple years, you start to have like these startup leagues, and at the end of the day, you get the MLB. And it's like
That's
we're on
right.
the same path, except we have the internet, so we can do that at 10, 15 times the speed.
Yeah, and content has only created even more excitement. I got to meet Rowdy Rogan, and he was like, is he 10? I don't remember. And I met him, and he's got a million. Well, I think it was close to a million followers or something crazy. And he's young, and he's playing COD, and he was like phenomenal at it. And it kind of gave him a chance to kind of step out of the crowd. But there's so many of those kids out there that won't do content, but again, just be part of a community and have fun with your friends. I mean, we used to play outside. We didn't have internet. I won't even go there that I'm that old that I went to school before internet, right? But we were always together, always creating memories, always doing something fun. And gaming is one facet of that. That's not everything. You still need to go outside. You still need to have family time. You still need to have, work life balance, and gaming balance. But that's the best part of being kids is having that integration of your buds being with you, whether you're female or male, it doesn't matter, or transgender, it doesn't matter. Find the people who you feel closest to and enjoy those times together. It's all that matters.
Yeah. And I think, at the end of the day, that's what, whether it's esports or not, that community aspect is what matters. Like just as being human. That's just what has brought us together is just happens to be video games.
Totally. And it doesn't matter who you are coming to the table. The gamer
Mhm.
part of you is what brings you together. All the rest of it is just an added bonus to find out who these people are that you hang out with and get to know them better. But gamer first. It's
Yeah.
always been the reality.
Yeah. So I guess, we've been talking about all of the challenges and stuff when it comes to esports. And I don't know if you want to talk about what you've been working on or not, or if that's still
Um,
uh
I
in
can
in
I can share
secret
some
or
things. Yeah, I
but
can share some things. It has been on my heart for a long time. I am working to build a platform that will organize all of esports. And that sounds like a really vague thing, but it's because the IP to which I built, I have to be very careful of. I'm in the process of raising funds for this platform. I'm going to be able, I can say this, if I pull off this vision and this capability to build this platform, I will have a lot of people in the industry working